Welcome to the Tradie Wife Life podcast, brought to you by Tradies in Business, where we talk to tradie wives about their goals, their challenges, their hopes and dreams, and how their trade business can help with that. Welcome back. You are listening to another episode of Tradie Wife Life, the podcast, where we talk all things tradie wives, their roles in the business, navigating relationships, all of the fun stuff. And today we're talking very much about figuring out a way to work together. It can be super, super tough. And I don't believe I'm an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have a few tips. Learned the hard way in some circumstances and through experience with clients, not just myself. It really can be a challenge running business together because just about every piece of communication we have feels personal. It doesn't when we work with others or for others. And yet when we're working together, a simple conversation can turn into something that feels really loaded and uncomfortable. I think we recently spoke about this on a She Says, He Says episode. And it's not the only thing I'll be talking about today. It can be really hard. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not always easy. And the benefit to pushing through and learning and growing is that you create a new strength in your relationship that others that don't have the benefit of working together don't have. It's certainly worth pushing through, even on the really, really hard days. We have a bunch of couples that work together in their trade businesses. In fact, most of our clients are working together with their significant other in their business. And we see transformation happen not only in their business, but within their relationships as they stick together and work through some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And some of the tips I have today have come from the concerns they've raised over the years and how to navigate some of these key areas so that they can find that success without the bickering or the undertone or the arguing that can often come when we don't have some of these simple things in place. I want to start by talking about understanding our own roles and our personal responsibilities. This is one of those lines that tends to be really blurred when we go into business together as a partnership, generally because the tradie wife or the tradie partner steps into a role thinking they're just going to help out. I'm just going to do a little bit to help out. And often from there, we realize the opportunity for a new career or the opportunity for some flexibility within our role, or for one reason or another, we decide to jump in a little more deeply into the business. We tend not to clarify the roles, and this can create, unfortunately, a whole bunch of confusion and opportunity for argument or disagreement, because we do things like, I shared an example where we paid the same insurance bill 3 times because there was no clarity over who was responsible for paying that insurance bill. And it's something as simple as a job description, which sounds really formalized when you are working with your spouse. And yet it can stop the confusion, prevent the disagreements, prevent mistakes being made, and allow you the opportunity to work towards your strengths, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. So I think we need to have some clear role definition. This looks like you can do it in a formalized process, and I suggest that you do as a position description, listing out, it only needs to be bullet point, what each of you will be wholly responsible for. So in our He Says, She Says episode recently, we were talking about who's the boss and how we make decisions. This goes back to that episode very much so. When we understand what each of us are responsible for making decisions about, that clarity can provide some confidence in our role. It provides confidence in one another because we know that we're playing to our strengths. And it also means that we don't feel like we have to run to one or the other to check on whether we can make that decision or not, which can really start to be detrimental to the strength of our relationship. It also means that we are not getting into those conflicting or confusing situations where each of us are trying to do the same task, or worse still, tasks are being missed altogether because we don't know who's responsible and we just forget about it or assume that one or the other will take care of it. So start off by creating a position description, or at least a basic list of roles and responsibilities for each of you, so that you have clarity around your position for each of you within the business. You do this for your team. or you will do once you have a team. And so it's a great opportunity for you to start at the head of the tree, and that's the two of you. Secondly, communication is key. Now, in the next couple of weeks, we have a podcast episode coming up with a real tradie wife, Rachel. Rachel and her husband have a mechanical business on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and their communication is like nothing I've ever seen before. And the reason their communication is so successful is they had boundaries in place around their communication really, really early. And some of these boundaries looked like the formalization of meetings. So they have directors' meetings in their cases. You might have management meetings. You might call them whatever you like, but they have a designated time every single week where they sit down together and in a meeting structure with a format that they follow. They take notes and they work through that format within their meeting. Now, this gives them the opportunity to talk about everything business without it blurring into the family space. And this is some of the issues that come about when we're trying to run a business together. Generally, our tradie in the stereotypical tradie business, our tradie partner is out on the tools or working with the crew. And we are based in the office, and we don't tend to spend a lot of time together working on the business. And so as a tradie wife or a partner, it can be really hard to get our questions answered. And so having some formalization about meetings and meeting structure can provide that opportunity for those questions to be answered without it being answered at the dinner table with the kids or while you're cooking or whilst you're doing something social. This can help stop the blurring of the lines. And so it doesn't feel like we are just holistically business. We have some separation between work and our personal lives. So having the regular business meetings is a great way for you to start to identify, okay, these are the questions that I need answered. You might need to do them frequently. They might be a short one every day, or it might be a couple of times a week, or you might be able to perfect it in time so that it's only once a week. Meetings can feel difficult. So I really advocate for pardon me, for you to do a walking meeting where you can. Perhaps it's walking around the yard. Maybe it's walking around the job site. Perhaps you could even do your meeting over the phone. Fellas, generally, let's still be stereotypical because it works and it's true. We all communicate really differently. They communicate super well or the best they can, often when they're doing something with their hands. And driving is a great opportunity for you to jump on the phone and have that meeting with them while they're driving to and from site. So that you can get the information that you need, they can get the information that they need, and you can all keep moving forward. So that's another tip that might work particularly well for you. And I think another area where we can struggle with sometimes when we're working in a partnership as a couple in business is being really honest. And we do this because we want to avoid conflict, but generally it creates conflict longer term. And so I encourage you to make time and maybe set some rules around having the opportunity for honest communication between the two of you. It needs to be really open and very honest so that you can get off anything that's on your chest without critique or criticism, sometimes without comment, so that you can work through what that issue is together. And often what feels like the issue won't actually be the issue. And if you can have some boundaries in place and have made some agreements with your spouse about how you're going to communicate with that openness and honesty that you require, without judgment in that sharing, you can often then find, well, what is the real issue here and work through that so that it isn't then creeping into your communication without really being said, which looks like tone and it looks like pressure or disappointment or the opportunity for frustration because you think something's happening that may not actually be happening. It can be really, really hard. And this is one of those times where you get to choose your hard. I personally think it's harder for your dissatisfaction or misunderstanding or something you need to communicate to fester away at you. And it's far better to get that out in the open, give it some space and some air, and for the two of you to work through it together as a team. That's going to take a lot of trust for one another. It's going to take some agreements around how we communicate those frustrations or anything that might have the perception of negativity by the other or criticism by the other. And so I encourage you to put some pretty firm rules around how that communication is structured so that you can get to your desired result without the need for confrontation or a disagreement. Next up, finding some balance between your professional and your personal life. Again, this is going to look like setting a lot of boundaries. It can be really challenging. I recognize this, particularly where we have a partnership and one of the partners is still on the tools. It means there's a lot less time for you guys to move through the communication that is necessary to keep the business moving forward. And so this is where we come back to things like setting those meeting times and the meeting structures so that nobody's being held up in what needs to be communicated. Being really firm on our boundaries and prioritizing personal time needs to be at the top of mind. Particularly when we're working in business together, it's essential that we have alone time. So that might be pursuing your own personal hobbies. It might be exercise time. It might be time out with your friends or your family. But it's really important to take some time out for yourself, both of you, so that you have that opportunity to remain fresh and open and be nurturing the sides of yourself that your partner doesn't necessarily fulfill for you, because nobody can fulfill us completely. We need to work on fulfilling ourselves. So, finding a way to prioritize your own personal time, but then also finding ways to prioritize your romantic relationship. Intimacy can be really challenging when you're working together because so much of it becomes about the children, the business, the running of the house, and quickly out goes the window any form of intimacy. Making sure that we regularly have date nights or date afternoons or a date half an hour even, or a coffee catch up without the kids in the morning. Some time factored into your week every single week where you prioritize one another, not just yourselves, so that you are continuing to give to one another, you are connecting, and you're creating that intimacy within your relationship is extremely important for you to be able to balance between the two, your personal and your work life. But setting those boundaries is going to be the most important point. Is there a time of day where you can stop talking about business and all conversations from there on in need to be something other than business? How can you prioritize your own time? And of course, how do you prioritize your time together as a couple? It's really important in business that we understand what our strengths are. This doesn't matter whether we're working in business with our significant other or we are working in business individually in our own careers. We need to understand what our own personal strengths are and what areas we have that provide us an opportunity for improvement. When you're working together as a couple, you're both going to have different strengths. Some of you will have customer facing strengths. Some of you will have system based strengths. Some of you will have financial strengths. There's lots of strengths that we have, and some of our strengths will be stronger than those of our partners. If we can identify what our strengths are, then the business as a whole can start to leverage the strengths of one another in an individual way that can help contribute to those position descriptions or the role definitions that we were talking about earlier. So I encourage you to critically sit together in a positive, critical way and figure out what your strengths are for each of you so that you can then start to meld that through what your position description looks like. Can be a hard thing to do because sometimes we feel like we're really strong in an area and somebody who might be critiquing or talking through that with us might think otherwise. And I encourage you to go into it with an open mind and have that conversation anyway, because it provides you the opportunity for growth within your business. I feel like you have a great opportunity in a partnership for you to give up some of the things that you don't really enjoy doing within your business where your partner has a strength and vice versa. Business can be hard and it can be boring and it can be tough and it can be a lot of fun, particularly when we're leaning into what our individual strengths are. And so it might take some time for you to work together to understand how you can make this work within your business. And yet, sitting through and working on an exercise like this, providing yourself with that clarity and that understanding will go a long way towards enjoyment within your business and working together. Let's talk about finances. This can be really tough because all of these conversations feel so incredibly loaded when we're working as a couple. I can talk to Warwick till I'm blue in the face about our finances within our business here at Tradies in Business. But thinking back over the years and talking about conversations about finances in my previous businesses, it's not been quite so easy, particularly when working with a partner. That's actually been quite challenging. And so I think all of this starts with understanding what our financial goals are as a couple or as a family. When we have that clarity about what we're all working towards, even though that's a personal conversation and a personal commitment to one another, it means that we can depersonalize the further conversations we have about our finances. When we're goal setting or we're making decisions about uh, what to do with our finances or what direction to take, maybe in purchasing a new vehicle or some equipment for the business or taking on a particular type of job, if we understand what the common goal is that we're working towards, it means we can have a far more pragmatic discussion about how to get from where we are now to where we would like to be. Sometimes we see in couples that we have different goals. We have very different understandings of what might be possible. And yet, if you pair it right back in that conversation, you generally are still working towards the same outcome. So if I think about one of our couples, I won't talk about who they are, but one part of the partnership has very different financial goals to the other. But when we had a big discussion about what they wanted to do with those finances or what having that particular sense of financial freedom for them, what it meant to them, it helped us understand that we were working, or both partners in the couple were working towards the same goal. They both wanted security for their family. And so that meant that we were able to help them set some targets that looked realistic and understandable for each of them. And that guided all of their decision making moving forward. It meant that they weren't personalized conversations or an opportunity for conflict because we understood what the end goal in common was. So again, this is one of those things that we might need to work through. Some of those early conversations might be a little bit challenging, and I encourage you to work through that with somebody else if you can, whether it's an advisor, a coach, it's an accountant, some sort of third party to help you work through some of these things can help you find a far better outcome than trying to do it all by yourself. But having those common goals or those goals in common together that you both understand, having that eye on the prize makes then the financial decisions that you need to make in the business so much easier to make because they can be done pragmatically. Now, when we think about our roles in the business, perhaps each of you are responsible for different financial decisions. Knowing that, as we said in the Who's the Boss episode, that they're being made with the ideal outcome for the business in mind. You might be able to break that up for you within your company. Here at Tradies in Business, we make all of those decisions together. However, if there is a time when Warwick needs to make decisions for the business, I know it's done with our mutual goals in mind. Warwick and I aren't a couple, but we do work together in business. We have the goals. I understand what his goals are. He understands what my goals are and what our family's goals are. And that is the guiding light for us making decisions within our business. I'd encourage you to do the same. All right, let's talk about the inevitable conflict that is going to happen in every single trade business and every single partnership. I suggest very early on in your business journey, or right now after listening to this podcast today, you take the opportunity when you are not in a state of conflict to set some rules of the game, to make some agreements on how you are going to handle conflict when it comes up. This can start with understanding what each other's triggers are. That's a long journey. That's not the easiest thing in the world. And over time, as you work together, you'll understand what triggers each of you to react in particular ways. Or when you're doing some work on yourself, you can start to understand what triggers you to react in your normal default ways. When we understand what those triggers look like, we can avoid triggering one another or understand even emphatically within ourselves, oh, I'm being triggered right now. Let's step back, take a moment, take a breath, and keep moving forward. But I think when we make agreements about how we're going to resolve conflict or work through conflict, we have the best opportunity for success so that these things don't drag on. It's very easy to say that, okay, we're never going to argue in front of our team, but when you're feeling really triggered, it's very hard to walk away from that. So having some rules of the game that you guys have agreed to prior to going into business together, or at the very least right now, after listening to this podcast, can really help you to move forward with your conflict when it does arrive, because inevitably, unfortunately, it will arrive. My suggestions are having some rules around the language that you use. There are some words that shouldn't be used for each of you, depending on what your triggers are. I would highly recommend that you both agree not to swear, because that is very triggering for everyone all of the time. Make some agreements about your tone and the way in which you'll conduct those conversations, and make some agreements on what it looks like to take some space. Not everybody can navigate the way through a conflict resolution situation within that situation. Sometimes they need some space and some time to digest what's been said, so that they can do so without the pressure of that conflict being right in their presence in that moment. And so having some agreements about being able to take some time and some space is super, super important. And then the most important tip I can give you around handling the stress or the conflict that inevitably will come up is learning how to actually listen without needing to reply. This is a big one. It's really, really hard to do. I don't want to pretend that this is an easy solution. It's very challenging to listen when what is being said to you feels like it's your fault or it's being delivered in a way that somebody's telling you you've done something wrong. And we want to either fix it or we want to explain ourselves. And yet that's not actually going to help drive the outcome that you're looking for if you want to move to conflict resolution. Instead, if we can sit through and listen almost as if we're a third party, try and disassociate from what's being said about us or to us, and think about it if we were eavesdropping in on another conversation, or we were trying to help another couple navigate their way through some conflict. What is the actual core issue at heart? What needs to be heard by your partner for them to feel as though that they're being validated in what they have to say? Learning how to do this is a big skill. It will help you throughout your life, but most importantly, through navigating some of those conflict situations that will arise. And so it's a practice thing. We start by doing the very best we can and learn how to develop that skill as we keep moving forward. The more opportunity we have to develop that, the more likely we are to move our relationship from disharmony, which looks like conflict, back into harmony. So we move to resolution and then harmony. Finding a resolution isn't always about fixing a situation. Often it is about just someone having the opportunity to be heard and validated. And then there are times when we might need to use something like the triangle of possibilities. It's a principle we talk about a lot here at Tradies in Business, to find the best solution or the best outcome for you and your relationship or your business. Triangle of possibilities is quite frankly or simply about understanding what all the possibilities are for finding a solution for the problem at hand, and then working together to find the solution that is best for the desired outcome, whether that be for your relationship and navigating through that difficult time, or it be for your business. All right, let's talk about growing the business together. Regular planning is essential for you to continue to work together to grow the business in the area you would like. This doesn't mean taking your business from a sole trader to a very large business with 20 staff. What this means is growing the capacity of the business in the way that provides you the profit outcome that you're looking for so that you can reach your lifestyle goals that you have both determined will work for you. But that looks like planning and it looks like doing it together on a regular basis. Here at Tradies in Business, we advocate for a 12-month plan. So every 12 months in January, we have a life and wealth planning day where all of our clients come together and we work on what their life plan looks like. So this is getting clarity around what their ideal week looks like, what their ideal month and then year looks like, what they might like to have within that time frame, what they might like their weeks to feel like. Do they want to be able to have a Friday afternoon off or a Monday morning off? Or do they want to be able to take holidays at a specified time? What financial outcome do we need to support those life goals? So that's the wealth planning part. And then we take all of this information and we utilize that overarching 12-month plan to create our 90-day plan. So every 90 days, we come together as a cohort and we plan out our small steps for the next 90 days in 1 month increments so that we're constantly taking tiny steps to achieve our bigger goals. This, for me, is one of the biggest keys to success. There's the older adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. This is goal setting and then action plans to get you from A to B. Unfortunately, frequently when we speak to trade business owners, they don't really know what their goals are. They have a vague idea of what they think they might like, but the clarity around that can be very challenging and hard to come up with. Spending some time together as a couple, really planning out what you want your future to look like, and then dialing that back into what you want the next 12 months to look like for you, and making sure they're smart goals so that they are achievable, they're recognizable, something that you both can understand, creating the actions that support that so that you can start to take those steps, mean that you can take your bite-sized chunks at eating your big elephant and getting you closer to where it is that you would like to get. As they always say, shoot for the stars. If you fall a little short, you're still up there in the beautiful sky. It's not a terrible place to be. We don't all reach our goals in the 12 months that we've planned out, but if we don't have a plan, then we're going nowhere. It's like being stuck on a roundabout without knowing how to get off. That means that we need to celebrate those wins and then take the opportunity to learn from the losses. No business has smooth sailing. We're going to have some hard times. And I think when we work together to understand what created those hard times and then find the learnings in that, we have the keys to success really simply and clearly so that we're not repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But for me, the biggest part of that is actually celebrating the wins. I don't know how many times I talk to tradies or tradie wives and they've not thought back over the past 12 months to celebrate where they've come from. And all of you are having growth in one form or another in your business consistently. We don't celebrate when we have successfully navigated client conflict. We don't celebrate when we have won our biggest contract to date. We don't celebrate when we've managed to consistently book out for 3 weeks in a row. We don't celebrate the seemingly small everyday things because we're so busy working towards the next thing. And so I advocate that as part of your meeting structure, you take the opportunity to look back over the last week, the last month, the last quarter, and celebrate some of those wins. And then create a ceremony of celebration that you can do together, whether it's going out for drinks together or going out to dinner together or sitting on the beach and watching the sunset together, some sort of celebration that you can have so that you can recognize the wins and successes you've had in your business, go a long way towards helping you feel good about what you're doing, even when it's feeling really hard, but then taking that time to learn from the mistakes that are made. We all make mistakes in business. I still make mistakes in business, even though I've been doing business in one form or another for the past, well, more than 20 years, a long time. I still make mistakes. Learning from those mistakes is the key to keeping moving forward. And doing that in a partnership is much easier than trying to be critical and do it on your own. So work towards that strength that you have as a couple, figure out what the mistake was, figure out what you can do better or where you need to go to get the information to make a change and make that change together. And then celebrate the fact that you moved through another loss or opportunity for growth. Finally, let's talk about a support network. Even when we're doing business together, it can be super, super lonely. It's really hard to understand where to from here when we don't know. And one of the hardest things for trade business owners is there's no school when we do our apprenticeship to teach us how to run a business. And there's nobody out there cheering for us. Tradies have one of the hardest reputations to get over within the public narrative. We've all heard the stories about the dreadful electrician or the dodgy builder or the concreter recently that tore up the driveway because somebody didn't pay. But we don't ever hear about the hard clients or the difficulties with staff. That's not out there in the public narrative. That's not attractive for the media. And so they talk really negatively about us. So building a support network so we don't quite feel so alone and to help us through some of those tough times is super important for us to be able to move forward. The other unfortunate part of being a trade business owner is we don't talk to one another because we feel as though there's so much competition out there. And if I have a great idea, you might take it. That means that this journey is really solo. It's very self-introspective. And that's a narrative that can be very difficult for you to break out of. This podcast is part of building your support network. It's your opportunity to see others in the industry that are going through or have been through some of the same things that you are. We have a fantastic Tradie Wife Facebook group that, again, is an area of support. So you can come and tell us what you're going through, or you can hear from others that are going through something and help support them, or learn from their wins or learn from their losses. There's a great opportunity for you to feel supported so you're not having to do it on your own. There's nothing more amazing than a community coming together to share their wins, coming together to support one another through their losses, and the understanding that you're not alone. You're not the only one to have had cash flow issues. You are not the only trade business owner to not know how to market your business. You're not the only one that is trying to navigate working through as a partnership together and finding it really confronting at times. You are not the only one who struggles to know how to deal with your team. You are not alone in any of these areas. These are skills we all have to learn as business owners. And doing so as part of a community is a great opportunity for you to accelerate that learning and do it in a far more positive way rather than feeling really alone. So, finally, today, I would love you to come and join us over in the Tradie Wife Life podcast group. You can find it on Facebook. And we also have our Tradies and Business group. If your tradie would like to be part of a community as well, they're a little quieter. You know what fellas are like. There's plenty of ladies over there too. I'd encourage you to come and join us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let us know so that we know what to focus on moving forward, particularly in these solo episodes. If you have any questions that you would like answered here on the podcast, you can drop them straight into the Facebook group. And you can reach out to us via our website, tradiesandbusiness.com.au. Hope you've enjoyed the episode. Thanks for listening.